been a couple of days since we spoke to Mark. He's tossed around a few ideas and we've finally come to the conclusion that rebuilding this engine is probably actually the best course of action. The 1.6 was too big overall. We spoke to the wreckers that supplied it. They were really good about it. They admitted they'd actually supplied us the wrong engine. So they gave us an engine that was supposed to be rebuilt, but they thought it had already been rebuilt. So they basically just refunded the purchase price all up. They're really good about it. They're really apologetic. So thanks to those guys for being honest and doing the right thing. But yeah, back to this. We're going to now tear this down. So we're going to take all the accessories off it, the inlet manifold, the exhaust manifold, all the engine mounts, and then we're going to send it away to the machine shop to be rebuilt. Whoa, that exhaust manifold's cracked big time. We may actually take that to the engine shop and see if they can weld it up as well. Because they've probably got a lot of experience in welding up cast metals like cast iron and cast aluminium and things like that. So they're probably actually the best place to speak to about repairing it.
So definitely not a DIY thing?
Cast material can be pretty crazy to weld. If it's cast steel, you'll be okay, but if it's like a cast iron or a mixed metal, it can be quite hard to weld. You may need either specialist equipment or specialist welding rods, which it's not worth it for us to buy those materials because the amount of times we do it, it's just probably not worth it. Yeah, well, that's cracked the whole way around pretty much. The floor killer. It's munted. He's better. This cylinder head actually looks like it's been reconditioned before, hey? Not that long ago either. Just the looking at the casting, how it's like a different grey to the block, like it looks like it's been blasted. If you have a look at the finish, see it's kind of like a really clean grey as opposed to like a bright aluminium like casting grey. It may actually be the reason why we're doing all of this, if someone's rebuilt it not properly. The clutch actually looks quite similar to the cappuccino clutch. It's like a bit of a balancing act. I was just going to crane it. Would appear it's still got coolant in it. Boo earns. The jam has been pumped. We're out of jam. This engine mount bracket's been hammered. Too much Kevin, the tilty wheels. It's about all we can do on this little G13. So we've stripped it all down. All the bits are off of it now. So now that it's basically a bare long engine, we'll take it to the engine reconditioning shop. They'll go right over it. We know it needs a crank blinish and some big end bearings. Mark also said it's got a broken rocker arm, so going to do a full head service, go right through the engine, do piston rings, all the bearings, all the seals, all the gaskets, and basically make it as new as we can. We're also going to deck the head to try and bump the compression ratio up a little bit. Don't want to go too crazy with it, but any power increase will be helpful in that van because it's slow as a wet week. So we'll chuck this in the ute and get it done. We've got the freshly reconditioned engine back. So the plan today is to get it completely fitted up, get the clutch and engine backing cover on, and if we've got time, we'll get the transmission on. And if we're tracking well, we'll also try and get it back in the van. So we'll leave it a bit open and see how we go. Ooh, a washer. We've got the same issue that we had with the Cappuccino. Last time we didn't have a clutch aligning tool. We used the Cappuccino transmission just to line it up because it was nice and light. While the carry box is fairly similar, I'm going to use a different technique today. So I've got just a couple of extension tools, and I'm going to run some electrical tape around the outside of both of those to build them up. So I've just got a little short extension that I've already put tape on that then fits into the 3/8 extension bar, and we're going to tape up the end of the extension as well, and then that'll align the clutch and give us a good setup so we can put the box on nice and easily. We've got our engine and transmission completely reassembled. It's almost ready to go in the car. The one thing I did overlook is that we don't have any spark plugs for it. Unfortunately, I didn't remove them from the engine before it went to the reconditioners, and they were pretty much brand new. Now that's going to stop us putting the engine in the car because it's quite tight to put them in once they're in the car. So I'm going to jump on Spares Box, order some, and hopefully they turn up in the next day or so, and then we can keep going and chuck it back together. We've got our new spark plugs ready to go in. It's a good idea to check the gap on these before you fit them. Most Japanese plugs come pre-gapped. I know NGKs all come pre-gapped. If you look at the part number and it's just the standard part number like BKR6E, that generally means a plug's a 0.8 plug. If it's got like a -11 or a -13 or -15 at the end of it, that's the gap in millimeters, but it's 1.13 or 5. So we're just going to give these a quick check. I'm pretty confident these are going to be 0.8, and that's what we'd want to run it at. Just got my feeler gauge. This is a single feeler gauge, but you can also buy the sets. I just carry like 3 different singles because we just use them to gap plugs. So it's perfect, as I would expect from NGK, because they're pretty good. They also run these little protective sleeves on all the plugs, so when they manufacture them, they're set the gap and then they're protected so they can't really be reset or damaged in transit. So that's another nice little feature. I know some of the American brands don't actually gap their plugs, so it is a handy little tip just to check the gap on all the plugs before you fit them, because you can have ignition dramas if they're not gapped correctly. So those are all gapped correctly, and now we're going to throw them in. Some of you guys and girls may be wondering why there's 2 coils and 2 ignition leads. This particular vehicle runs a waste spark system. So basically what that means is it actually fires number 1 and number 4 cylinder together and number 2 and number 3 cylinder together. That's basically just because of the firing order, and then number one and number 4 pistons will both be at the top of the bore at the same time, and 2 and 3 will both be at the top of the bore at the same time. I'm not really going to go into the specifics of why manufacturers use it, but just thought I'd explain why it looks the way it does, because for some people it may be confusing that there's not 4 coils or 4 ignition leads in a distributor and a coil. So just a quick rundown. There's tons of information that's really detailed already on the net about ignition systems. Haltech do some pretty cool videos about ignition systems as well, so it's worth checking out the Haltech YouTube channel. But yeah, just thought I'd explain why that looks the way it does, because for some people that probably is a little bit confusing. So now I've got the ignition system back on the vehicle. Just got to put one more engine mount under the bottom here, and then we're good to actually chuck this thing in the car. After I find out where these spare bolts go. You may be a little bit confused as to why we have an engine crane when we're putting the engine in from the bottom. We're actually just lifting this side of the engine up so I can put the engine mount on the underside before we can chuck it in. It may be a little bit difficult to actually try and put the second mount on the passenger side once we've got it sort of in the car, because we need to use the table to steady it while putting it in. So we can't actually bolt only 2 of the 3 mounts in while it's sort of hanging there without probably causing some damage. So just going to lift it quickly with the crane so I can actually bolt that 3rd mount on, then straight back in the car. This is so uncomfortable. Ah, the old 2 radiator cap trick. That'll be fun to bleed. The only things we've got left to plug in are the cam and crank sensors. We're going to leave both of those unplugged until we get oil pressure. Once that's done, we're going to fit all the shifter assembly and the handbrake assembly. Then we can fit the seats, then we're completely finished. Other than bleeding the cooling system, of course, which I did forget to mention. But we've made awesome progress and it's only about lunchtime, so pretty happy with that. We'll prime this oil system, then once that's primed, we're gonna have a bit of lunch and then get back into it. The first cranking ever of this engine since a full rebuild. Fingers crossed. No oil pressure yet. Give the starter motor a rest for 5 seconds and we'll go again. We have oil pressure. So now we can connect the cam and crank angle sensors and spin it over and see if it's going to fire. Suzuki, you temptress. Why would you do that to me? So you can put the cam angle sensor onto the ignition coil, but you can't put the ignition coil plug on the cam angle sensor. Interesting. It's a pretty exciting time. We've got everything as ready as we can to do the first start. There's not any coolant in it yet, but we do have oil pressure. So I'm about to flick the key for the first start. Fingers crossed everything's good, but it's time to do it. Yoo! Sounds awesome. Props to the engine builder. That's mint. Done the first startup, everything's good. So we've just put all the coolant in, or coolant and water I should say. We've mixed that at about a 3-to-1 water to coolant ratio, which is correct as per the manufacturer of the coolant, I should say. We're just going to start it up and basically let it run now to bleed the cooling system. Every vehicle is different when you're bleeding the cooling system. This particular one actually has a bleed port on the engine. Unfortunately, it feels as though that bolt's seized. There is also another bleed port on the heater hose, which is actually higher than the one on the engine. So we've just opened that port and we're going to use that one. But some engines like SR20s have a tiny little bleed bolt as well, so you need to use that. So there's all different procedures, but try and check out or try and find a manual on your vehicle, because then you can get all the relevant information. But basically we're just going to start it and run it. Do a couple of fan cycles and that should sort of give us a pretty good indication of if it's happy or not. And if we've got any issues, we can look at other ways to bleed it, but I don't really foresee any issues, so we're just going to start it and run it and see how it goes. Go van, go! We've given the cooling system a really good bleed. Everything seems pretty happy. The fan cycles in and out as it should. We've had a bit of lunch. I've eaten 10 million cookies, so as you can tell by my amazing figure. We're going to chuck the handbrake and the shifter linkage in, then the center console. One thing I did forget before too is a little splash tray to go in the front and a bracket for that. So we'll get all of that done. We'll get off the hoist and then we'll go for a road test. These are going to be the nightmare thing of the day, I reckon. Maybe it wasn't the best idea to run the exhaust or run the car for an hour before we decided to work 10 mil from the exhaust. Christmas is saved and all the children rejoiced.
had that triple S since new, eh?
What did you say?
Said I need this engine in my K truck.
Oh yeah.
This would be sick. What K truck, you ask? All will be revealed later.
This is Scrape City over here.
I forgot about it before too. Sorry, Mark. As it still scrape. Sweet, got some coolant in there. It's holding pressure, it's always a good sign. All looks good. Well, we've got the van up and running today. It's going really well. I'm really happy with the performance of the car now. It actually goes a lot better than it used to. The old engine did have a fair few issues though, so there's every chance that it was pretty flogged before. So giving it a bit of a freshen up. The machine shop did new piston rings, new bearings. They skimmed the head and the deck of the block, so that's actually given a bit more compression. They've completely balanced the bottom end, but they've also added Suzuki Swift GTI G13B rods and crank. So it's now a balanced steel crank instead of a cast crank. They've also got different lighter rods, I believe. So it may give it a bit more response. And it just having all 16 valves functioning now, because it no longer has broken rockers or other issues. It just drives just so much better. It's just chalk and cheese. So I hope Mark's as happy as I am with the outcome, but we'll get this back to Mark and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. That'll do. Then I can put my jumper on. Yeah.